This episode is brought to you by the Solo to Group Practice webinar. It's a free webinar that you can find at practiceoftherapy.com/group, and also brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 174 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, glad you found us. Glad you're here with me, and hope you'll come back for more by subscribing to the podcast. And I hope too that maybe you're feeling a little bit of the tinges of spring in the air like I am here. Although the tinges are in my sinuses, and that's never a good thing with all the pollen in the air. But anyway, hope you're having a good weekend, whenever you might be listening to this. I'm excited for you to hear from my guest today, Dr. David Geier, and boy, he was a fascinating guy and just a really interesting guy to listen to. And I think you're going to find that as well. He's a physician. He's an orthopedic guy, and he has really kind of found a formula or a way to kind of make it into the media. I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't seen him on national TV before. So he's a bit of a celebrity, at least in my mind. But anyway, looking forward to you hearing from him about getting into the media, getting into local media, and just kind of making that leap there. I know there are a lot of folks out there that might be a goal for them. They want to really establish themselves as an expert and just kind of be well known. But also it's being able to make sure that the people that need your help the most are able to find you. So I'm looking forward to you listening in on our conversation and you learning about Dr. David Geier. And we'll get to Dr. Geier here in just a moment. But one of the things that I get asked a lot is just about, particularly with people that I do consulting with, and just from some of the focus groups, and just people that listen to the podcast, I get questions about making that shift from going from solo practice to group practice, and really understanding when is the best time to do that. And the answer is not really a best time, but I would say the time when you're ready. And because I get owning and leading a group practice has been such an important part of my own professional journey, I wanted to share a resource with you that I created with my friend and fellow practice owner, Dr. David Hall, over at Psych Maven. If you go over to practiceoftherapy.com/group, you can access a free automated webinar that we did together called Solo to Group Practice, Adding More Therapists to Grow Your Time and Income. And in this webinar, David and I share some of the most important lessons that we have learned in our own journeys as private practice owners, along with some practical tips and ways to challenge your self-doubt about going into group practice, and also some thoughts on some of the major pitfalls about launching a group that we've learned and learned from others along the way. We also have some time-limited bonuses and discounts that we'll let you know about for those that are participating in the webinar, and it's exclusively for those folks. And but wherever you are in your journey, and just if you're thinking about going into group practice, I would encourage you to take a look at this webinar. Again, it's a free webinar, and if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/group, you can sign up for a time to participate in the webinar. You'll be given several choices of times, so you pick the one that's most convenient for you. So again, check that out at practiceoftherapy.com/group. And also, before we get to Dr. David Geier, I'd like to remind you to go over and check out our sponsor for the podcast, and that is TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They're the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice. And I was excited this week because they had done some updates, and now they have available a history form that is available through their patient portal. And they have a patient portal that I just absolutely love. It has allowed us to go virtually paperless in our office. And so all of our clients that schedule with us, we're able to send them to the patient portal. They fill out their paperwork and sign it electronically. And they can also look at our schedules and be able to schedule from there. And then it sends them reminders about the appointments. The other thing too is through that portal, you can also do telehealth. So it's all available there in one place. And then almost as good as all of that stuff is that because we're an insurance-based practice, TherapyNotes will file the claims electronically. So be sure to check them out, therapynotes.com. And if you'll be sure and use the promo code Gordon, it's just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services at no cost to you. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com. So I think those are the only two announcements I had for today. And so without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. David Geier. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I am so excited for you all to get to meet Dr. David Geier. And I can, in just a short conversation we've had so far, I know this is going to be just an exciting person for you to hear and just really hear what he's been able to do with being able to get into talking to media and really establishing yourself as an expert within your community. So, David, welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this. Media has been something that sort of grew out of just a side passion, and it's now been something that has become helpful in my primary practice as well. And I'm, hoping that I can share some of that success for people trying to do that with their practices themselves.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. So as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've kind of landed where you landed.
When I was growing up, I'm the son of a doctor. My dad was a radiologist. My mom was an OR nurse and then turned nurse manager. But you would think that, all right, that's going to push me straight into the medical field. But growing up, I actually wanted to avoid medicine at all costs. I was going to be, work in business. I was going to get my MBA and work on Wall Street. But my freshman year of college, I had an episode, and I won't tell the whole story, but I basically went into what's called anaphylactic shock while running one day, where I had this life-threatening allergic reaction. Managed to get to student health. They basically saved my life with, epinephrine and some getting me to the ER, and everybody stabilized it. But what was really disheartening, so everybody knew what was going on, but I went through a battery of tests and never got an answer to what caused it. In fact, the allergist I saw after the fact said, well, let's just hope it doesn't happen again. Yeah. And again, I was a freshman in college, and to me, that just wasn't good enough. I felt like, somebody that's played sports his whole life and exercised his whole life, just to be told, all right, you can't run again. You can't, just in case this doesn't happen. That wasn't acceptable to me. So I switched to pre-med and went to med school. And now I'm doing what I love to do. I went, after doing my orthopedic surgery training, I did a fellowship in sports medicine, and now I help people feel and perform their best, whether they're getting older, whether their body's breaking down and they're having injuries, or it's medical conditions. Mm-hmm. And that's so gratifying. Being able to tell somebody that, hey, you get to go back and run again, or you get to go back and play soccer again, is so gratifying. But that's a one-on-one relationship. I may see, in 30, 35, 40 patients a day, maybe 7 or 8 of those are new patients. So I'm helping a lot of people. But then I realized by being on the radio or being on TV and some other things that I've really learned how to do, I can help a much, much bigger group of people. And so I was just doing it because I like helping people. That's why I started a website and a lot of social media. But then I realized that those people wanted to go further and wanted to see me in my practice. And I realized how important this was to building my practice. So I really went full steam ahead on the media. I put a lot of time into it now, probably more than you would need to if you're just trying to build your practice. But now there isn't a day that goes by that one of my patients doesn't say that they read my newspaper column or saw me on my daily. I'm the medical expert of TV, 2 TV networks here, and I do daily appearances for them. So people hear it or see it all the time, and that's really gratifying. Both from I got to help people, and it builds my practice.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that it speaks to that I think people hear from me a good bit is the importance of building a niche and really establishing, in my mind, at least marketing is really making sure that people can find you, because there's more than enough people out there that need our help. And there's really communicating to people how you can help them. And, the media is, I think for some folks that might be just kind of intimidating to think about, getting on a radio program or a TV program or, any of that sort of thing. So in your working with people and coaching people through this, where's the starting place for this?
It really depends on what people are trying to achieve. And when I talk to people and coach, different experts, and it can be physicians and counselors and therapists, but it can be accountants or financial planners or real estate agents. The biggest thing that you want to think about, whether it's marketing and social media, like you said, I couldn't agree more about what you said about having a niche, whether you're trying to market yourself and get your name out that way, or you decide to go into the media, you really need to know your message, who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And so I really stress figuring out what that message is. And it basically comes down to who you help and why. And especially if it's a fairly narrow who, rather than I just help everybody, that can be really important, because people, yes, they'll go to your website or, see you on TV. But what gets them to say, hey, I want to see her, or I want to see him, is if you really feel like you can help them. And so not only talking about how you can help them, but showing them can be very helpful. And you can't do that unless you take the time to figure out exactly who you are and why you do it.
Right. Yeah. And that's again, echoes a lot of the kind of my message with folks is really figuring out your why. But first of all, I guess, just being able to really clarify how you help people and what you're passionate about too. And so what to kind of take us through a little bit of your process for doing that with folks.
There's some strategies, and I'll give you one that I can and try, but a lot of it just comes down to sort of brainstorming what I just said. Take literally a sheet of paper, maybe have a glass of wine one night, just write down everything that comes to mind, even things that seem kind of crazy. It may be based on your ideal patient. It may be, the problems you like to deal with in the office. But as far as there's not one unique formula, but it's something along the lines of I do something, some action for some group of people, so like I say, I help people feel and perform their best, regardless of age, injuries, or medical conditions, is sort of a purpose or mission statement. And there's formulas for it. It can be, I do this for the, there's lots of ways to do it. But those are just something 1 to 2 sentences. And like you say, the more narrow it is for a specific group of people, and the more you can explain why, yes, it's going to potentially get people to hopefully choose to see you and work with you one-on-one. But it also helps the media. It helps those reporters. It helps the news producers, the radio producers think of you when some topic comes up. If they, rather than I, know X therapist, but I don't know if he or she could talk about divorce or, whatever it is. If you get known in a certain niche and can really articulate that, it helps everybody involved. It's going to really help you expand your presence in the media and then hopefully get them as patients and clients.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's I think I love the idea of the exercise of just sitting down one night and just writing all of this out, or just being able to think about how you help someone. But one of the things that I think is an important step in this is just really thinking about who are your ideal patients or clients, and what are the problems that they're having.
And one of the great things about that exercise, because that's so important. I mean, in my world of sports medicine, I sometimes cringe when I get somebody that comes into me that is beyond the where I can really help them. They've got bone on bone knee or hip arthritis or something and really need a joint replacement surgeon. Obviously I talk to them, I do the best I can, but at the end of the day, I'm not the type that can help them. And so it can be good to know that from just like you were talking about marketing earlier, to really market to the right people and when you're talking specifically the media, not every medium is going to be right for your potential ideal audience. I mean, if you're going after new mothers, for instance, or young married couples, that may be a different magazine or a different TV show than, say, if you're talking about work-related burnout and retirement type issues, things like that. And those are, knowing exactly who you help makes an enormous difference in your ability to market it, whether it's the media or anything else.
Right, right. Yeah, it's such an important piece. So if somebody is thinking about reaching out to media, regardless of which type, what's the starting place?
Before I would sort of do all right, I want to be on this TV show talking about this. And sometimes there's just a topic that is so timely that you want to, you're going to capitalize on it. And you just reach out to a producer of a TV station or a radio show host or a reporter in a newspaper. And that may be good for a one-off appearance. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They may approach you, which is always a good thing as well. But I'm a big believer in developing relationships with writers and reporters and journalists, whether that's newspapers or magazines, radio show hosts and producers, and TV show producers, reporters, that kind of thing. Because the value of the media isn't in being seen once. That can help. There's no question about it. But just like advertising, the key is in the repetition. And so if you start to develop, like I just did an interview yesterday with the NBA, one of the NBA writers for USA Today. And, I got back to him right away. We talked about LeBron James, his injury, and that was great. But I spent maybe the last 5 minutes talking about, the different things I can talk about and help him. And he's already thinking of other stories that he's going to use me as an expert. That's where the value of the media is, in developing those relationships so that they ask you back over and over and over when they have a topic in your field. And so before you start with the individual tactics, really identify, the types of media that would be helpful for building your practice, where you can contribute information that would be helpful, and then starting to identify the people and building those relationships that pay off for years.
Right, right. Yeah. And I think, just thinking about folks that will be listening to this particular podcast in mental health right now is just a huge opportunity, because mental health is just really in the forefront with people and I can imagine that there are a lot of, like local TV stations and, newspapers and that sort of thing that would love to be able to talk to somebody that's an expert in mental health. And so that's, I think there's a great opportunity there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. There are, just COVID, it's created all kinds of health issues and everything else. But the mental health side, in fact, I actually may explain this here in a second, but one of the things I do probably 3-4 times a week is I just go through an RSS feed that I have. I have different categories: medicine, health, fitness, exercise, things like that. And one of the stories I saw, I don't remember the exact number, so obviously don't quote me on this, but it was something like half of married couples say that their relationships have been strained during COVID. And I saved it because that's something that I'll probably talk about on one of my daily medical segments on my ABC channel. But having said that, I mean, that's like gold for a therapist. I mean, you could just say, send the article as a pitch, especially if it's a reporter or producer you have a relationship with. I guarantee you they'll have you on at some point to talk about that, or they'll send somebody to your office.
Right.
And that takes very little work. So if you're thinking, hey, I want to start doing more media stuff, even before you start pitching, create some kind of system. I use Evernote, but the tool doesn't really matter. But just any kind of interesting article you see, any kind of new study that you see, just keep it somewhere, clip it, save it as a PDF, put it as a file in Evernote. My notebook in Evernote's called Media Pitch Content, and literally any kind of interesting article I send to it. And then if, and the good ones, really, this sounds kind of corny, but like People Magazine is a fantastic source for knowing what celebrities are going through. And then you send that to a reporter or producer and say, hey, A-Rod and J-Lo are going through these marital troubles. This isn't very uncommon. 40% of married couples throughout society have this same issue. I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
But, and they like things that you can potentially tie to celebrities, but then you're teaching and you're helping people about that same topic more broadly in your community.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with this, you probably are. There's a when you mentioned the RSS feed, this reminded me of this, and I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but there's a service out there called Haro, HARO, Help a Reporter Out. And I know in the past that has been in my own practice, just being able to respond to those things. It's just it's an email that you get every day when you sign up for it. And I guess you can Google it, and we'll have links in the show summary here. But the you can just respond to different topics that reporters are actually looking for an expert in. And so, yeah.
Yeah, Haro's great. I used to use it a lot, and I still get those emails and try to read them as much as I can. It's gotten so popular and it's great. I mean, I've gotten national magazines, national newspapers. I think Fox News. Look for the ones that say anonymous. Those are almost always the big media sources.
Interesting. That's a great.
The trick with Haro, there's two tricks with Haro that is kind of worth noting. Excuse me. You have to respond to those emails really quickly. There's so many people now that respond to those that you're probably not going to get used unless you basically respond to the query in the first 30 to 60 minutes. And they almost always now, and I used to be able to respond to one and say, hey, I'd love to talk about this. I can help you with this. And we could talk about X, Y, Z, it's sort of this sample, this pitch template that I had to respond to it. But now they pretty much always list the questions in the query, and you just respond with the answers. And you may not know for a month or two if they used it. Set up a Google alert for your name. That may be the only way you hear about it.
Right.
But just know that going in. But yeah, you can get big sources, and you may say, well, what is USA Today going to do to help me build my practice? But you can put that link on your website, and it builds a lot of credibility. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Haro. It's a little bit of work, but boy, it can have some big payoffs.
Right. Yeah. But I think, the thing is being able to take the time to, like you said, to reach out to producers, to editors, to the media, and just really be able to say, I'm here to help. When you have, it's really no different than I know in another episode we'll talk with a doctor that has developed a tool for assessing mental health problems. But one of the things that I think is from a marketing standpoint is to be able to develop relationships. I mean, that's really all it is marketing is about developing relationships. But I know particularly for mental health providers, developing relationships with primary care providers in their community, because a lot of times that is the front line for people that are having mental health struggles and that might need meds and all that sort of thing. And so developing those relationships, and same thing with media, I would say, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the relationships are the key, both from the the media, like I say, the value is getting them to ask you back over and over. I mean, if you look at my media page, so many, like the Today Show site, I've been on 7 or 8 times, interviewed by the same reporter. And that's true with all these different magazines and newspapers. And then obviously now in TV and local radio and my newspaper column, the value's in the repetition, but you don't get that without showing how you can help that media source, that reporter, that producer. Right. But then on the flip side of that, building that relationship with the viewer, with the listener, that's the real value of the media over advertising. When you watch an ad, somebody's trying to sell you something, and there's nothing inherently wrong about that, but people generally trust what they hear in the content of a news show much more than the ads around those segments. And so if you can get, once a month or something, where you're on a show, whether it's radio, TV, whatever it is, offering just simple tips to help people, they may not need that tip now, but then when circumstances in their lives put them in that situation, they're going to remember who you are. You're going to be the first person they think of to say, yeah, I like him. I like her. I like how she explains things. And I feel like she can really help me. That's really the value. Building those relationships with people listening or watching or reading over a long period of time. That's where your patients are going to come from.
Right. That is so true. And I think that's, one of the just as I've learned through podcasting is that it creates a relationship. Even though we might not talk directly, there's something about with the media where you feel a connection that wouldn't necessarily be there just through an ad or whatever. Yeah.
Well, podcasts are, yeah, absolutely. Podcasts are so conversational that can be really helpful, even more than, because TV, let's be fair, you're going to get 2 to 4 minutes tops, and you're not really going to be able to sell at all. Radio, you get a little bit longer, but you can't have 3 or 4 minute answers on radio. You can sell a little bit, but podcasts, they can really get to know your story. And I'm a huge fan of telling your story and why things are important to you. And so, no, I couldn't agree more about podcasts. I know there's a lot of resistance to podcasts among, at least in the physician world, where they're like, yeah, but what good does, if I'm in South Carolina, what good do listeners in California do me? But you can't really look at it that way. People use it to kind of get a sense of who you are, how you help people, do they like how you share information and that kind of thing. And that's where I really feel like podcasts can be super helpful.
Right. And I know for most of us that are in this kind of mental health field, we've really got, for the most part, just a caring heart. And so it's a great way to just kind of help out and share information. So, well, David, I want to be respectful of your time. And I know we could talk about this for hours, but tell folks a little bit more about how they can get in touch with you and maybe some of the services that you offer for people that might be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I would do, just simple ways to get started, especially if you're already doing some interviews in the media. I do host a podcast. It just started a couple months ago called the Media Pro Show. Once a week, I just do a quick 5 to 15 minute, just one tip on something that you can implement right away. So I think the one that just posted Monday was on how to have good Skype or Zoom interviews, because that's, to be fair, how TV is going right now with COVID, and what the background should look like, camera type specifics, audio specifics that will make you look better than 99% of the experts interviewed remotely on TV. So simple things like that. I think that show, like literally, you can listen to it going to work or driving home. It's very short, but really practical tips. And then you can certainly go to my website, mediaproscoaching.com. I've got a free sort of, I think it's 3 or 4 pages, 20 or 30 tips about just simple things to do and remember before a TV or magazine, newspaper interview, whatever it is, things that not only make you do a great interview, help you do a great interview, but get them to ask you back over and over again. Simple things, some of them very self-explanatory, some things that I've learned the hard way over years, but can be really helpful. That's free on my site. And there's a link there that you can go if you just want to talk to me and kind of see what I think your opportunities are. I'd certainly love to talk to you for 30 or 45 minutes and just see, what your message is and maybe how the media, I might be able to give you a few strategies to help you get started in the media.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll have, of course, links in the show summary and the show notes for this, but tell folks your website, David.
Yeah. The website is the name of the program, mediaproscoaching.com. If you want to find out about me specifically, I'm, Dr. David Geier, drdavidgeier.com, all across social media at Dr. David Geier. But for the media stuff specifically, I have really gone to not just doing a lot of media to get, my message out and to help people, that are trying to feel and perform their best. But I've really taken to heart that I feel like experts in all kinds of fields really, and especially in the, like you say, the mental health world, can really help a large number of people through the media. And if I can at least get people interested in doing that and pointing them in the right direction, please let me know how I can help. Because I think there's a real need for people that can explain all this information in ways that people can understand.
Yeah, great. Well, Dr. David Geier, I'm so glad we had you on the podcast, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, I'd love to anytime. And I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking to people that really care about helping people. And I think that's one of the great things about you and your profession is that it's a tremendous service that it's an honor that we get to help people in our ways and that people trust us to do that. So I'm always excited to work with people and talk to people and that are doing, great things like that.
Awesome. Well, again, check out the links in the show notes and the show summary. And thanks again, David. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Dr. David Geier. I know I just really enjoyed my conversation with him. And he was just as I said earlier, just a fascinating guy. And he's really given me a lot of ideas of things that I've put on my to-do list about just promoting my practice more and maybe getting involved in the local media, doing maybe some guest spots on TV programs, news programs, that kind of thing, and just finding the right people to connect with to do that. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think it would give you a lot of exposure. So be sure and check his materials out and his website, and that's drdavidgeier.com. And he's got lots of great stuff there. I checked it out myself. So be sure and check it out. And I hope to get David back on the podcast before long. So, so glad you got to hear him. Also, be sure and check out the Solo to Group Practice webinar. It's a free webinar, on-demand webinar, and you can find that at practiceoftherapy.com/group. And so if you've ever thought about going into group practice, particularly if you're a solo practitioner, this would be a great place to start. And you're going to learn a lot, hopefully, from myself and David and the things that we cover in the webinar. So be sure and check it out. practiceoftherapy.com/group, just GROUP. And you can sign up to watch the webinar. So anyway, and also be sure and check out our sponsor for today's podcast, and that is TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They're the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice. They're who I use in my practice, and I can highly recommend them. I don't really talk about anything on here that I don't recommend. And so they're one that I really think are pretty great. So anyway, check them out. TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code or the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services for free. Sorry, I'm so tongue-tied today, but I'm just going to roll with it. So anyway, glad you joined me for the podcast, and I hope you'll come back and be sure and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And glad you're with me. So I've got a lot of exciting guests coming up. I was just looking at my list. After this week, I've got like 4 or 5 guests I've got to interview. And so that's going to be exciting, and some great folks going to be coming up on the podcast here in the future. So be sure and subscribe, bookmark it, share it with your friends, listen to it in your car, whatever. Glad you're with me on this journey. So take care, folks. Have a good rest of your week or weekend whenever you might be listening to it. And we'll be talking to you next week. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.